and welcome to today's video. Now we're going to be taking a look at a few small jobs that I want to be completing just to sort of finish off some of the work I was doing on the interior of the Micro. One of the first ones is actually painting up some bulbs, the larger size dashboard bulbs that actually go into the heater cluster, so the heater control panel. Now I've got some LEDs which should be suitable for this particular job, but for whatever reason the contacts on those LEDs do not seem to work very well with the actual connectors at the back of the heater panel, whereas these conventional bulbs do seem to work quite well. So what I've got here is I've got some suitably coloured glass paint. Now it says on the label of the glass paint that you're supposed to paint the glass paint on, leave it to dry for 24 hours and then bake it in the oven at 160 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. I think it's Fahrenheit, Celsius to be honest. So the way I did it was I actually put the bulb back into its holder, dipped it into the paint, held it for a little while to let all of the paint drip off the bulb, and then dried the bulb itself using a hairdryer. Now this method may also work if you've got say orange coloured paint and indicator bulbs, so you can actually paint your indicator bulbs orange. There is one particular instance where you may need to do this, and that's if you have an early XJ40 which has got the clear side repeaters. You actually have to get for those orange coloured bulbs, and what seems to happen is the bulbs actually, the colouring on the bulbs delaminates after a while, leaving you with clear light, which can be an MOT failure. So if you don't have any orange bulbs on standby, it may actually be worth having a pot of the similar to this paint that I've got here but in orange on standby, so that you can actually quickly dip the bulb before the MOT, let it dry off and then pop it back in, and then you've got a temporary fix. So with the hairdryer I literally just sort of clipped the or held the bulb in its holder inside the actual holder, and then just sprayed the hairdryer on full heat at it for a couple of minutes or so and just left it there. So I don't want to go too hot, but then again I don't want it too cool either. And actually doing that seemed to actually harden the actual coating onto the glass. Obviously if this was a much larger piece of glass and you were doing this for painting and art purposes, then yeah, you would stick it in the oven, but this is just a little interior bulb. So I need to do a total of 2 of these. I've done one, I need to go and find another one which is somewhere in the car, I think, probably in the ashtray, so I need to grab that out. You also just need to make sure that you pull it out of the actual holder so it doesn't get stuck in there with the paint. So it's a good idea to do that when you've painted it. In fact, what I would do in retrospect is probably tip some of this into a small clear container. One of those ones that you use for taking medicine, cough medicine might be good. And then obviously just using the pliers to hold on to the bulb holder and then dip it in, but not go fully in. The next job is with the Sport, the SI dash that I've got, which is the green instrument cluster. There's no readout for the NCVT or automatic transmission. So on later models like mine, the original dash would have had a sport light, which basically tells you when the gearbox is in its sports mode or if there is a problem with the gearbox itself. On older models that was the NCVT light, which basically illuminated to tell you that there were problems with the transmission. So what I've done on mine is there is a bulb in there at the moment, but you don't see the bulb through the green coating on the dash. So what I've done is I've purchased this sort of generic Chinese purchase LED, which has got a little readout on it, which literally just says O/D off, so overdrive off, which is the closer I get to sport or gearbox or something like that. So what I've done is I've taken a standard generic bulb holder and I'm just soldering on a couple of fly leads onto that holder, as you can see here. That will go into the dashboard, and hopefully the soldered elements will make contact with the dash and allow any sort of current through the dash to travel to the LEDs themselves. or the LED rather. What I have then done is I've got some bullet connectors, just standard generic bullet connectors, and clamped them onto the end of each side of the cable. So the end of this particular cable and also the end of the LED as well. The reason I've done this is I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the polarity is on the dashboard. So I'm not sure which side is positive, which side is negative. If I did know that, I could probably get away with, because there's quite a bit of length on this little LED, I could probably get away with soldering the LED directly onto that connector. Now I did try to power it using this single 1.5 volt battery, AA that I've got here, but it turns out that that's not actually enough to power this. This actually needs at least a 12 volt supply, although I've managed to get something out of it just using 6 volts. As you can see here, there's no light at all, so you know it needs at least 12 volts to get something out of it. It'll probably work with 9. I think I've had it working with a few button cells in series, and it has sort of displayed fairly dimly. So it does work, it's been tested. So what I've done with this is I've just put on some bullet connectors again on this end, clamped them down. Now the mistake I've made in the past is I tend to use pliers to clamp these down, and I use the sort of the wire stripping / wire cutting part of the pliers, which is that bit in the near the centre, near the fulcrum point where the pliers come together. What I've done in the past is I've actually accidentally gone too deep and actually ended up chopping the chopping the thing off. So you need to go just hard enough to clamp it together, but not so hard that you actually end up chopping the entire connector in half. So you sort of clamp it with the... oh, there it goes. That's the other thing that can happen, so it can go flying off like that. So you clamp it at the bottom just hard enough to get it to hold in, and then you use the wire cutting / wire stripping piece just to clamp it down that extra little bit, just to bring it all together, and that's usually enough to actually give you a sort of a good connection inside. They're not the best thing to use. I'd rather be soldering these and using heat shrink wrap to bring it all together and sort of keep it nice and keep the contact nice and secure. But for this particular exercise it's perfect for what I need, and also means that if I do get the polarity wrong when I'm fitting this, then I can easily swap it over. You'll be able to test immediately if it's worked, because you can either just wire it in and then keep the ignition on and press the sport button on the gear selector, which will sort of obviously cycle the light on and off, or I believe the light will also come on at first ignition. Anyway, we're nearing the end of the video. The next video is just going to document drilling the dash binnacle to fit these, and also fitting those heater cluster lights into the heater cluster itself. It does require removal of the center console piece and the radio, but the whole process shouldn't really take us too long, so we'll be covering that in the next video. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies. Thanks for watching, see you next time.